आज हमारी गेस्ट होने वाली हैं मिसेस नवनीता गौतम, जो कि इंडिया की पहली एथलेटिक थेरेपिस्ट है एंड वो बहुत सारे स्पोर्ट्स में काम कर चुकी है, बट स्पेसिफिकली टॉकिंग अबाउट क्रिकेट, ओडीआई वर्ल्ड कप में उन्होंने काम करा और पिछले 5 सीजन से आरसीबी की मेंस और वुमेन्स टीम दोनों की एथलेटिक थेरेपिस्ट रही हैं।
नेचुरली इस पूरे पॉडकास्ट का नेचर और टॉपिक जो है वो होने वाला है अराउंड जो हमारे फेवरेट क्रिकेटर्स हैं जो आजकल अपने फील्ड के टॉप पर हैं, उनके पीछे के फिटनेस के सीक्रेट्स क्या हैं, वो कैसे अपनी फिटनेस को मेंटेन करके रखते हैं, आईपीएल कितना ज़्यादा टैक्सिंग होता है। ये काफ़ी सारी अनटोल्ड स्टोरीज, वो अनटोल्ड स्ट्रगल्स आपको जानने को मिलेंगे फ्रॉम अ पर्सन जो कि उसी ड्रेसिंग रूम में रहते हैं। आई थिंक ये पॉडकास्ट काफ़ी ज़्यादा इंट्रोडक्टरी इंसाइट्स देने वाला है फॉर ऑल द क्रिकेटर्स जो कि अभी एक यंग एज पे है। एंड आई थिंक ये उनको अपने पेरेंट्स के साथ भी देखना चाहिए, उनको भी काफ़ी कुछ सीखने को मिलेगा। सो विदाउट एनी फर्दर डू लेट्स स्टार्ट द पॉडकास्ट। लाइक ऑलवेज सब्सक्राइब कर देना चैनल को। हमारा जो फ्री टेलीग्राम ग्रुप चैट है वो पिन कमेंट में आपको मिल जाएगा, उसको भी जाके चेकआउट करिए। चेक आउट आवर मेंबरशिप्स एंड नाउ सिट बैक एंड एंजॉय। Which is the biggest injury myth that you've had to bust when you're dealing with players?
Injury myth.
Or something related to the physical body, essentially.
More than an injury myth, I think I have a recovery myth. So, in terms of some people do not believe in icing. I'm talking in terms of golf, and when I worked with basketball in India, and I think they're like ice nal, like garam saj. You guys know it, right? As in like cold, hot. They'll go into that rapid thing, and now in the research, contrast is so important, like doing a cold bath and then in a hot bath. It's so important for overall body recovery. I think that myth, they're like, I'll get sick or that kind of stuff. I think that I eventually had to really educate other sporting athletes, not for cricket and golf mainly, but like other sporting athletes, that it's okay to have that recovery in your body weekly.
So I was wondering that it is just about the ice baths, but the hot and cold situation is something new that I'm listening to. What is the difference exactly?
Yeah. So ice baths are also really good, and it's also very easy because like you just put water and you put ice, right? And obviously you have a specific temperature and time limit that every athlete gets into. And
I'm sure it's mentally not that easy though.
Yeah, exactly. So you can adjust the temperature, obviously, and the ice cubes accordingly as well. But like ideally, if you constrict the blood vessels because you numb the body, and then you get out of the ice tub, you obviously have a vasodilation. Your blood vessels are like fresh, pumping, all ready to go, and that feeling for recovery is even better. But now that the research is more going across contrast as well, or like those whirlpools that are going on, but that's dependent on the accessibility of the stadium also. So if not ice bath, it's a go-to thing to do.
I would ask you something because I have suffered through this, and perhaps my mom would be watching this when we release this podcast. There's this myth, or perhaps you can tell if this is a myth or not, that you should not do weightlifting before reaching a certain height because it stunts your height. Is it actually true?
That to an extent is, but however, there needs to be a specific, a good S&C to measure your workload management. So nowadays, if there is an S&C that I feel like is, like making a 10-year-old kid, like a 10-year-old golfer lift way too much, I will question it and be like, this person is growing. And there needs to be a cap in terms of, there needs to be a cutoff. And be like, yeah, itna hi workload hi chahiye. There's a lot of golfers that I know that are only dependent on deadlifts. And, it's like, and it's a natural thing. I think for me and you, be like, the more the weight, oh my God, it looks good for the gram, for the video, woohoo, right? But I think you need to have a really smart S&C to make sure you cap that part and be like, hey, you know what? At this age, we're only going to do this much. And that age, I think also, it's so important to just have fun. I think any sport, I think parents should really encourage the player not to be specific to a sport early, and like not to be like, no, you're only going to play cricket. I think you just have to give them the freedom to play sports that you jump a lot, you run a lot, you throw a lot, right? And be exposed to all that, because I think that will play a huge role in the career later down. Instead of just being really focused on your sport and weight training itself. And more than that, I think looking at having a one-sided sport also, that the right side shoulders will droop. And as a kid, it'll look even more obvious, right? So I think finding an S&C or even like a physio who's mixed with S&C is so important that they make sure they do a lot of correctional work at a young age. Because that's something that could limit them later on in the future also, because they are weight training. Like, you play cricket you're a bowler. You'll only bowl with your right hand, right? You'll only land with your left foot, right? So if you keep doing the same weight training, you're just doing the exact thing left and right equally. Does it kind of make sense? So doing correctional work, doing things that maintain your left ankle range of motion, because your left ankle has to hit the floor, has to absorb the ground reaction force, or right shoulder external rotation range of motion, because your right arm is bowling, your right arm is throwing comparative to your left. So little things like this. It doesn't have to be like weight training, but a little correctional work, a little rehab in between. But that's just to find a good S&C and physio related to that.
That's actually a really interesting discussion point, because I was wondering about myself. So I'm a right-handed guy. And because I'm a right-handed guy, I have to hold the bat on my left hand. And so because I've been doing that since my childhood, my left forearm is much stronger, or rather the definition of the muscles is much nicer on the left forearm as compared to the right forearm. And I never thought about doing any corrective exercise in the gym while I was playing. Is that something that you have to actively work on with the players, that you have to compensate the other side of the body as well?
Absolutely. Even in terms of golf, right? There's so many let's go back to cricket again. The stress reactions and the stress fractures that happen into the lower back, right? It only happens to one side. And that's because of that overload, the squishing to one side after the follow through. And if we had something on the left side, have something in terms of, like stronger oblique muscles, stronger core muscles, a stronger left glute to absorb the stability and the ground. Because when we land, there's a force coming from the ground also, right? So we land, force goes down, but the force also goes up also. So we got to make sure we absorb that as well. And with the momentum that you're in as well. So it definitely plays a huge role. And that all comes from a musculoskeletal screening. And just to look at the underlying issues that potentially could develop after X amount of cricket or X amount of golf. Golf is also a one-sided sport that you keep hitting, and eventually you start having a little pinch on the left side as well because of the follow-through phase. And but that again is an MSK screening that needs to be done. And sometimes, depending on the environment that you're in as a player, if I was a player, it's hard to tell, for example, a coach being like, hey, I don't want to bowl 7 overs today, or golfer to tell a golf coach, like, I don't want to hit 100 balls today. But sometimes you have to do it.
It's so contradicting to the first thought I get as a player, because when you're a kid and you join a new academy, just to put out the impression for the other guys and to the coach as well. You do stuff like reporting very early, an hour before the practice actually begins. And then some kids also pretend like they're running and they're doing a lot of practice just to show that how dedicated they are. And actually what it is doing is, the more you practice, of course it is crafting your skill to another level, but it is also creating imbalances in your body that you have to work for as well, that you may not be looking at.
अब सोचो अगर एक क्लिप इतनी बढ़िया थी तो पूरा का पूरा पॉडकास्ट कितना बढ़िया होगा। तो अगर आपको इसी क्लिप का पूरा पॉडकास्ट देखना है तो यहाँ पे क्लिक करिए, और अगर आपको ऐसे ही और क्लिप्स बिंज वॉच करनी है तो यहाँ पे क्लिक करिए।